Good evening, everyone. As Stephanie said, my name is Matt Shank. I'm very proud to be the interim president of the World Affairs Council. Just took over several weeks ago. So on behalf of the council, I'd like to welcome you all to our Ambassador Series program. And before we introduce our guests, first a big thank you to our strategic partners at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center for their wonderful, wonderful hospitality, providing this spectacular venue for our programs. In addition to this live event tonight, which we're all fortunate to be here, these programs are filmed on our YouTube channel and are available within 24 hours. So please tune in if you'd like to catch the program again and show it to some of your friends. So tonight we welcome to our podium His Excellency Andris Teikmanis, Ambassador of Latvia to the United States. And Latvia has existed along the Baltic Sea in Northern Europe for centuries. The Germans, Swedes, and Russians have traded dominion over the area throughout that time. In 1920, Latvia won its first liberation from various competing powers after the Latvian War of Independence. The state gained recognition from both the Soviet Union and the international community before its occupation and incorporation into the Soviet Union in World War II. The Republic of Latvia gained independence once again in 1991 during the collapse of the Soviet Union. Soon after, Latvia joined the United Nations, and in 1999 became the first Baltic nation to join the World Trade Organization. And in 2004, Latvia officially became a member of both NATO and the European Union. So tonight we are very fortunate to have Ambassador Teikmanis with us. He's the 6th ambassador of Latvia to the United States, taking his post in September of 2016. And prior to coming to Washington, he served as the ambassador to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. He's also served as Latvia's ambassador to Germany, the Russian Federation, and the Council of Europe. His career has also included holding the position of Secretary of State to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 2008 to 2013. So, Ambassador, welcome to you. And we'd also like to thank and welcome our discussant tonight, Anna Gawel. Anna is the managing editor of the Washington Diplomat and a news columnist for the Diplomatic Pouch. Prior to the Washington Diplomat, Ms. Gawel was the morning news assistant at WMAL Radio and a production assistant at PBS for the political commentary TV program To the Contrary. So on behalf of the World Affairs Council, we want to thank you both for being here tonight. Look forward to the discussion. Thank you. Help me give them a round of applause, please.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Matt, for the introduction. I wanted to start off with the Centennial Celebration this year. Latvia, like many of its European neighbors, is marking the 100-year anniversary of independence. But it's a bittersweet anniversary because, as Matt mentioned, for much of that time, independence eluded Latvia, first with the Soviet occupation, Nazi Germany, Soviet occupation again. Can you just start, Ambassador, by telling us a bit about what this anniversary means to Latvians and also to you personally, given that you're commemorating it here in the United States, which never formally recognized the Soviet occupation?
Yes, well, good evening. And first, I'd like to thank everybody that has joined to this conversation. I think I really appreciate people who, in the middle of summer, have decided to devote their highest political interests, or global political interests, where normally global political interests are dealing with water temperature, hotel location, or traffic jams on the highways. Well, thank you very much for being here. This is a very particular year indeed for Latvia, for other Baltic nations. We are celebrating thousands years, that's for Lithuanians. Latvians are celebrating 100 years since our modern statehood. Well, it doesn't mean that the history of Latvia would go back only 100 years. When half a year ago, we made in the framework of our culture program of Centennial Celebrations, we made an exhibition about 1,000 years of Latvian architecture. It was quite exciting exhibition, but it also shows how much in the history we are going back. But 100 years for modern statehood, as many countries in Europe, we are really proud to celebrate this very nice centennial. Looking back on our history, well, probably the 20th century was the not most happiest century for Latvian history, for Baltic history, because we are small nations, we are proud nations, we are beautiful nations, but we are just in between some big elephants, and we were between big elephants before the war, between two world wars, and the choice where to be, closer to Russia or closer to Nazi Germany. Actually, there was no choice. At the same time, if we are looking back on a relationship with United States, this relationship we marked last year, 95 years since we established our diplomatic relationship. And, well, only a week ago, we marked another very important date when on July 23, 1940, the so-called Sumner-Welles Declaration was issued. Declarations that determined that United States would never recognize occupation of Baltic states and incorporation of Baltic states into Soviet Union. Well, and if United States at that time said never, they meant never. Well, we concluded with Soviet Russia our first peace agreement in August 11, 1920, and Soviet Russia, at that time still Soviet Russia, even not Soviet Union, recognized independence of Latvia and other Baltic states and solemnly signed a treaty that it will never ever pretend to the territory of Latvia. Well, this never ever for Russian Federation lasted exactly 20 years. And that's the difference. And we could feel all these 50 years, or even more, 70 years since we established our diplomatic relationship, we felt how strong friends we have in United States. And our legation, all the 50 years of occupation, both Soviet and German, our legation was active here in Washington, D.C., and our flag proudly waved over Washington. There were two Latvian embassies who were actively working all the years of occupation. One was in Washington, another was in London. I'm really proud to, having worked in both. And next year we will celebrate our embassy in London, 100 years. That will be another Centennial Celebration. So when we established our independence, when we reestablished our independence, we renewed our relation to United States, and believe me or not, we have still in force a couple of bilateral agreements signed in the 1920s. They're still valid. That shows that 50 years actually for the history is a very short moment. For the history of the state, it is a very short moment. And still, Baltic people remember the time, and they remember the time of First Republic when Latvia was flourishing country, flourishing state, rich state, and each family has kept these memories and told to children, to grandchildren, and we knew that there is a life different to Soviet rule, and that was an enormous motivation for Latvians to fight for getting back our freedom, getting back our independence, And I'm proud as well that, well, my life has posted me not only in different embassies, but also as a member of Latvian Parliament. I signed the Declaration of Independence in May 4, 1990. And that was probably the most exciting moment in my life, as in life for many, many Latvians. But, well, it is a history. And now Latvia has turned totally a different country. We don't want to be called former Soviet Republic, because even during Soviet time, we didn't feel as part of Soviet Union, and we didn't want to be part of Soviet Union. Well, today I read in an article of one Swedish newspaper, one Swedish scientist wrote that it's a good time actually for Baltic states to formalize their membership with Nordic states. And certainly Baltic states have more affiliation to Nordic culture, to Nordic states, to Nordic business. Well, we see how close we are. We see how like-minded we are, and we are like-minded indeed. And even some other countries like United Kingdom has recognized that, well, this is a good club. This club of Nordics and Baltics, Club of 8, is a very good club. When Prime Minister David Cameron proposed to establish Northern Future Forum, 8+1 forum, and he found that this is a good club for like-minded states that well, do care about human rights, do care about innovations, do care about social rights and economic development. That's what is most probably exciting qualities today for Latvia and for other Baltic states. Mm-hmm. Here we are.
And on that note, obviously, the Baltic states and the Nordic states, they share a very complicated, long, and painful relationship with Russia, the elephant that you mentioned. And tensions continue to define the relationship to this day. Obviously, Russia's provocations in the region are well known, some of which predate Moscow's annexation of Crimea in 2014. For example, we write about in our current issue that this August marks the 10th anniversary of Russia's war with Georgia, about 20% of whose territory continues to be occupied. So Latvia itself is home to a sizable ethnic Russian-speaking minority that constitutes about a little less than 20% of a total population of about 2 million. What is your government doing to combat President Putin's increasing assertiveness and propaganda campaigns, both in the region and at home, where many Russian speakers have complained about being marginalized by the government?
Well, we have indeed the whole region of around Baltic Sea has quite a similar history and similar development. And well, just to remember, Latvia has been a nice piece not only for two big elephants, but also for some other countries as well. And in 17th century, Riga was, well, I would say differently. Stockholm was not the biggest city of Sweden because Riga was the biggest one. But certainly being in the northeastern part of Europe and having common border with Russia, we should always be careful. We should always be vigilant what our big neighbor is doing. It doesn't mean that we are afraid. No. As a normal country, we want to, and we are striving to establish good and neighborly relationship with our Russian neighbors. But like for Tango, well, Tango needs two, and of course, it's not depending only on us. It's depending on Russia's policy. And again, if we are looking back on history, Russia was one of signatory and guarantor states of Budapest Declaration for nuclear-free Ukraine and for sovereignty of Ukraine in 1994. Well, this this forever lasted, again, only 20 years. We appreciate the very recent statement of State Department on our Secretary Pompeo about non-recognition policy of Crimea. And this is very similar statement to Sumner-Welles Declaration. And this is a real non-recognition policy for Crimea. And well, as I said, 50 years, maybe it's not such a long time. Well, we can wait a little bit. But we, being next to Russia, we have our own experience, and we have good and not so good experience in dealing with Russia. Of course, Russia is very important, our trade partner. It is the biggest trade partner among third countries. Well, 7-8% of foreign trade that we are having with Russia is not very crucial experience. We would like to have more, but again, it's always depending on Russia. Mostly, our trade is going by 70% with European Union countries, and it's booming and developing very rapidly. But we know also the experience how Russia is using, well, as we call it now. Well, previously, maybe some years ago, in the Cold War, it was some kind of propaganda war. Now it's hybrid warfare activities that are being used, and of course, many new means are being used, like social media, like media. Well, we know all these means because we know that there are activities related to Latvian parliamentary elections every time, but we are prepared. And we will have our next parliamentary elections in the beginning of October. And we have already some experience how actively different kind of hybrid warfare activities are ongoing in media, in social media, among NGOs, in different kind of activities, spreading out fake news, totally fake news. Well, but we know it, and Russia has never succeeded in somehow having real influence on the results of elections. So, well, we are prepared to conduct our elections. We are prepared to address any kind of activities related to election process. We have, government has established a special working group that's observing and monitoring election process. We have established direct contact with biggest companies of social media, like Facebook, like Google, like LinkedIn, and well, we have some kind of hotline of communication to be prepared and to react at any moment when it is needed. So we have our own experience. We are not panicking. We are not making any fuss about activities that may appear. We are prepared. Well, we know that well, information space coming from Russia in Russian language, it should be considered very carefully because it might be very biased. Well, at the same time, we have free press, and there are no limitations, whether it's Latvian media or Russian media working in Latvia. Just we are trying to prepare alternative information. Our national TV channel, one of our two national TV channels, are part of programs is preparing in Russian. Well, prepared by Russian journalists, talk shows, news, discussions, and that's an alternative source. That's why I think Russian people living in Latvia, they're better prepared. Well, if maybe 90% of Russian population in Russia are getting its information from three major TV channels, what these three major TV channels are transmitting, I think we know. And there's probably lack of alternative, whereby in Latvia there is an alternative, and people can get alternative point of views, and that's a choice what to choose.
Well, we certainly have a lot of alternatives, although I always say we are #RealNews. Before we move on to other subjects, and you'd mentioned the digital realm almost of a battlefield, but I want to talk about one more very large elephant in the room, which is President Trump, Russia, and NATO. And obviously, the most recent summit in Brussels, President Trump highly criticized NATO allies for not spending enough on defense. And then in a very widely publicized performance in Helsinki, he cozied up to President Putin, largely dismissed what every American intelligence agency has concluded, which is that Russia meddled in our election. What was your reaction to these very diametrically opposed summits, and how concerned are Latvians that the U.S. under President Trump will no longer adhere to Article 5 of NATO's charter, which says that, an attack on one member is an attack on all? And obviously this is very relevant because I believe Latvia will be hosting the NATO Northern headquarters in 2019. So,
well, I think we should distinguish two things. One, all possible discussion that's going on in media with a lot of different opinions, contradictory opinions, and then look what are the decisions made. And the last NATO summit was very, very productive. And last NATO summit made decisions that were so much relevant to all NATO members. Well, it decided about cooperation with European Union that paved the way, for instance, for some kind of military Schengen that's desperately needed for European countries. It's decided upon this readiness initiative, or 4x30 initiative, about ground troops, naval troops, air troops, ready in 30 days for reaction. It decided upon headquarters in Latvia. It decided about member states' commitments to increase the defense spending. Well, defense spending actually is nothing new. The decisions for 2% of defense spending were made not in Brussels. It was made in Cardiff 4 years ago in Wales. And that's actually the implementation of Wales' decision. Well, since Wales' decision, the NATO budget has increased by $87 billion. It's quite a lot. And it's going to increase maybe in 2 other years, or by 150 billion. So, well, this is ongoing process, and I think even, well, if we would not have any discussion, maybe, well, live discussion, maybe sometimes contradictory discussions among NATO member states, then the NATO summit would remind me the Congress of Communist Party of Soviet Union, when only one spoke and others applauded. Well, it's not democracy. That's quite normal that we have discussions. But what is important, what kind of decisions are being made? And this NATO summit really made very, very important, long-lasting, future-oriented decisions and showed its very, very strong unity and affiliation to Article 5, starting with Article 5. Well, another summit, or I would say maybe meeting in Helsinki, I was trying to get out of many news what has been decided, what might be said, what has been said, what might be said, what hasn't been said. I drew my conclusions, and the only agreement that came after this meeting was to have another meeting this year. And then this decision was corrected that the next meeting probably will take place next year.
Stay tuned.
Well, no, I think if two biggest in the world nuclear powers, if leaders of two nuclear powers are meeting, I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing for the world, for world security, because we should recognize that currently the level of relationship between United States and Russia is as low as it hasn't been since Cold War. Well, I think politicians should do something to improve things. And if two leaders are having a meeting, that's generally a good thing. Well, let's go on. Let's see what will happen. I think Congress will follow to every step. Media, American media will follow to every step and follow all the developments. But I think the mere meeting as such, I think that was a good thing.
We'll definitely be following it, for better or worse. But I mean, ever since the end of the Cold War, obviously Latvia has sought greater integration with the West. As Matt mentioned, joined the European Union, NATO, WTO, OECD, and it adopted the euro in 2014. But it also endured a major economic crisis in 2008 and 2009, stemming from the global recession. Your country made an impressive recovery, in part by enacting austerity measures as part of an IMF EU bailout package. Unemployment has been slashed, and the economy is now forecast to grow 4% this year,
Well,
hopefully,
the
knock on wood.
half year was 5.1.
Okay, all right. So can you, well, this situation, though, stands in stark contrast to the wave of populist movements that have gripped the continent, parties that promote Eurosceptic policies and rebel against this German-led model of austerity to climb out of debt. What advice, if any, can Latvia give to countries such as Italy, Austria, even Germany that are grappling with the rising populist backlash against Brussels, and then also this, lingering frustrations with the Eurozone crisis that really hasn't ended in countries like Greece and Italy?
Well, that's really a million-dollar question, because I think each country is different, and societies in each country are different, and probably the motivation can be different. When Latvia was hit by global economic crisis in 2008, we took really very drastic measures to reduce our spendings. I have my own experience. I just very end of 2008, I was recalled from Moscow and assumed position of state secretary in our ministry. Well, that's not state secretary like in US. It's a high civil servant in the ministry. And one of my first decisions was to cut the salaries of my staff, including my own, by 30%. Well, Latvians love to spend money they have earned, not they have borrowed. And that's probably our philosophy. And that's why Latvians, well, we were not happy about it, of course, but we did it, and we cut very severely, and our government cut very severely expenditures and costs of civil servants, and I just cut jobs, reduced red tape, reduced number of civil servants as well, and well, it resulted in recovery in 1 year and a half. The growth for Latvia started in 2010. And then it went back with over 6% growth annually. And our government, our Prime Minister, Valdis Dombrovskis, he was re-elected twice, despite of these very, very severe cuts, very, very severe austerity measures, because, well, the government's policy was first to make reasonable cuts. Because before we had for a number of years, we had some double-digit growth, but in fact it was more than a bubble than a real economy. Well, just to assess realistically where we are and what should we do and how much we have. Another policy instrument was to keep very close dialogue with society in general to explain the policy, to make it understandable to everybody. And third, to work on the measures together with social partners, with employers' organizations, with trade unions, NGOs, social NGOs, and keeps this dialogue very, very intensive. So that was the reason why government was re-elected twice, and we got recovery, and we left the assistance program of IMF and World Bank and European Commission earlier than it was scheduled. Well, it was a bitter experience, but this is Latvian experience, and probably, well, Paul Krugman would not agree with me, and he predicted that that's the last what Latvia should do, and we should devaluate our currency. At that time, we still didn't have euro. Well, now we are part of Euroland. At that time, we still had our national currency. We did not devaluate our national currency. And it was right decision because we made internal devaluation of costs, of spendings. Well, that's Latvian experience. Maybe for other countries, it doesn't work. It worked for Latvia. Well, the negative impact, of course, we are still facing today. Many Latvians left. They used free movement within European Union, free movement of labor, and they left Latvia. While those in particular, those who have made big loans, who bought their apartments, bought houses, and they lost their jobs and they couldn't repay. So they went to get jobs in other countries. Well, this is an issue we are still facing, and we are encouraging Latvians to come back.
Now, on a related note, and this is an issue in terms of demographic crises that many countries face. So obviously another huge factor in the rise of populism has been immigration, which is, a huge issue here and abroad. And one of the driving wedges between Central and Eastern European countries and the EU is the refusal of member states, such as Hungary and Poland, to take in refugees to help share the burden with frontline countries, such as Italy and Greece. So what is Latvia's stance on the various EU proposals, such as to redistribute refugees, set up voluntary screening centers for asylum seekers, and is Latvia itself willing to open itself to immigration, in part, again, because of the declining demographics of the country?
Well, this is quite complicated issue, I think, for many European countries. I think when the migration crisis started, I think, European Union was really not prepared to tackle this crisis, and probably we lost. I mean, the European Union lost maybe 1 year or even more when real decisions were made on cooperation with neighboring countries, cooperation with Northern African countries, cooperation with Turkey, and that was essential to make and monitor and control external borders of European Union, external borders of Schengen area, because within Schengen area, there is a generation new generation of European countries who just doesn't know what does it mean borders in Europe. They don't recognize borders. But while it was really a big challenge for European states, and I think the decisions were made with delay, but they were made. And now I think European Union is concentrating on cooperation with neighboring countries, on protection of external borders, and that's a common business for all European Union member states. Latvia, as well as other Baltic states, took the position that, well, we are ready to share our part of hosting refugees, but only on voluntary basis. We didn't agree to any compulsory quotas for each member state because, well, probably for smaller member states, we can recognize that our decision can't be not as influential on European scale than for some bigger countries. But, well, we agreed to be the part of a distribution scheme on voluntary basis. We accepted our quota. We agreed to over 700 refugees. That was distribution quota across European Union countries, and that's our position today. Well, Latvia is not the country where major trafficking routes are going and crossing Latvia. Well, we are keeping our eastern borders under quite intensive monitoring, and while we are facing illegal immigrants or illegal migration from Russian border, coming from Afghanistan, people coming from Afghanistan, people coming from Vietnam or some Iraq, some other countries who are just using Russia as a transit land, and well, we have constructed in the part of the border some fence that allows us to have better control of not only human trafficking but also smuggling. Well, we have to care about our borders, but this discussion is still ongoing within European Union about well, Dublin scheme, how will it work, and this discussion will continue, and we are part of this discussion. We don't bluntly reject to accept any refugees. No, well, but we are accepting on a voluntary basis, and that's a position that's common in all three Baltic states.
So now, one final question before we open the floor to other questions. So you mentioned earlier Latvia is holding its parliamentary elections in October. One recent poll showed that the opposition center-left Harmony Party is in the lead, which is also the largest party to represent the country's Russian-speaking population. Obviously, you can't predict the results any more than we can predict the results of our November elections. But, what can you tell the audience just a bit about the upcoming vote and who the major players are?
Well, we are joking in Latvia. Where are two Latvians, there are three political parties. And of course, Latvians have very, very strong and consistent hobby. A year before elections, they are creating new parties. And then half a year before elections, they are trying to unite some newly created parties and create some common blocks. Well, I don't know really I'm not going to predict the results of Latvian parliamentary elections, but I would say, well, we have some parties that might be considered as populistic. I wouldn't say they will make big gains. Well, at the very end, when in Latvia we have absolutely free campaign and no limits. Everybody can campaign as any party may make its own campaign for elections. But at the very end, when person is in a polling station and confronted with a ballot paper, then it's just reflect once more. Well, basically, our experience has been in the last, well, nearly 30 years that we have always had a coalition government. Well, made of 3 parties or even blocks of parties. Maybe coalition is not as efficient as one-party government, but it brings stability. I would guess we will have another coalition government. What kind of coalition? Well, I'm not neither God nor Nostradamus. I will wait for October 6th, and then we will look for results.
Well, I think we can.
Well, one thing I should say. Well, it doesn't matter at all which ethnicity you belong, whether you are Russian, Latvian, Jew, Ukrainian, or Estonian. If you are on the list of Latvian elections, well, it doesn't matter your ethnicity. It does matter what kind of opinion, what's your political point of view is. That's what really matters.
Well, I think we can relate to the unpredictability of the fall campaign season. I don't know if we can relate to the stability part of it, but we'll see. So let's go ahead and open up the floor for questions. There is oh yes. And there is a microphone here to the side. And if you could keep your, state your name, affiliation, and please let us know your question.
Thanks for your presentation. My name is Li Yang. You mentioned the election and democracy. And then democracy by itself is not guarantee a good election result. In the ancient, you have an examination, you pick up a very good character as a person who got a very good integrity, and then you got a government to do a good job. So people are happy to follow that type of tradition. You have a good society. But now, I think you can see capitalism is not very successful, maybe a failure, maybe in the United States, in France, in a lot of places. So I just go with that democracy, because the democracy is a very, in a sense, very much misleading and abused, because they don't really follow a good example, good justice and fairness. So in other words, they can be manipulated. So I just wonder, in your country, how do you improve the democracy in a sense to get a better election result so you can elect a good capability, good people to manage your nation?
Well, I agree that, well, democracy is quite a challenging model for nation, quite a challenging model for society. You are just describing democracy nearly like Winston Churchill did it. My answer would be education. And well, we should educate our societies, and that's what Latvian journalists are doing in a splendid manner, and in particular in this time before elections, they are discovering all possible ways and means how misuse of democracy is being used, how fake information is being put somewhere in media or social media, how the schemes are working, how bots are working. Well, in Baltic states, around 90% of all the information spread by social media is being generated by bots. And well, people know it and people are prepared. Well, I mean, education does mean better preparedness for any challenges that might be brought before elections or after elections. And a society should be educated.
Thank you for the question. Next, sir.
Good evening, Ambassador. My name is Patrick Lisa. I'm a member of the World Affairs Council here in Washington, D.C. I have a question regarding your term as the ambassador here. As noted in the beginning, you are the 6th ambassador to the United States. What goals that make you stand out in terms of your predecessors that you are willing to achieve or trying to achieve during your time here in Washington? And given every ambassador has a different set of circumstances with this administration and so forth, but perhaps you can highlight some of your top goals as ambassador.
Well, one of my goals or my priorities is the security of my country. And here I can proudly look back on decades of excellent understanding, excellent relationship, and excellent cooperation with United States. In 2 weeks, I will visit Michigan. And we will celebrate 25 years of Michigan National Guard and Latvian National Guard of 25 years of state partnership. It's really great partnership between two National Guards. And when I came here 2 years ago, my first visit, somehow it happened, I went to Michigan and visited the headquarters of Michigan National Guard. And I learned about this excellent cooperation between Latvian and Michigan National Guard. And when I visited the Hall of Fame in these headquarters, and I saw fallen Michiganders who have fallen in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and on this wall, I saw also Latvian soldiers who have fallen together with their American partners, American soldiers. Well, we have shared some blood together. And this is a brotherhood that lasts for decades and will remain for decades. They lost their lives in Afghanistan. Well, security of my country is of course, my first priority as ambassador in the United States. And United States is really the strongest guarantor of Baltic security. Another one, of course, the permanent instruction of any ambassador is to promote economic relationship, and that's what we are trying to do at our best. Well, any ambassador, all my predecessors have done it, and I will do it, and I will do my best to increase the level of trade, exchange of investments, getting to know people and companies, and coming to common projects. And third, probably I will mention in strong relationship with Centennial to raise awareness about Latvia, about Baltic states, about Latvians in American society. Well, America is a great country. Americans know quite well what's going on in America, but I take it that they don't wake up with the first thinking, what's going on in Latvia? Well, I'm trying to promote the name of Latvia everywhere where I am, and not only myself, but our great Latvian community. We are counting around 100,000 Latvian Americans living in the United States, and we are using our Centennial as a good incentive to send different kind of reminders across the United States that, well, we are here, we are so close. And if you will happen to be at Niagara Falls on November 17, then no, Niagara Falls will be illuminated in Latvian national colors. And there will be many such actions that will promote Latvia as a country, Latvian culture. Well, probably the most important Latvian, most well-known Latvian in the United States, who is it? It's not ambassador, it's not me, it's Kristaps Porzingis, who's playing basketball in New York Knicks. Well, and of course, we can promote our country through culture. Well, I came back a few weeks ago from Latvia, enjoying a marvelous song festival we are having every 5 years, where 43,000 singers, dancers, musicians gathered on one stage and performed. 43,000. That's quite a choir, not bad, or dance group. But we have not only, big choir traditions, historical traditions, going back, in 5 years we will celebrate this 150 years of this song festivals tradition. But we have our great opera singers, like Elena Garancha, next month or so, in the fall, I'll definitely go to Met Opera and listen to Elena Garancha or to Alexandra Antonienko or to Christina Opolite. They all are permanently on all the biggest world stages, opera houses. Well, last year, not this, but last year, 2 Latvian conductors were competing for Grammy. Andris Nelsons, who is heading now Boston Symphony, and Maris Jansons, who is heading, many orchestras. Well, we are a nation of musicians, and we are proud to be a nation of musicians.
Well, I know in terms of the Latvian American community, my grandmother was Latvian, so I don't know if she woke up was the first thing she thought, but maybe number 2 or number 3 at least, and also sang quite a bit. So we have one final question.
Good evening, Your Excellency. Omar Aldib, and I'm a visiting medical student from Egypt. And my question is, in the latest NATO summit, President Trump was very critical of one NATO state for its reliance on energy from Russia in specific. Do you see that the Baltic states' reliance, and in general, and Latvia in specific, the reliance on Russian natural gas as problematic? And if so, what are how do you see other alternatives such as liquefied natural gas, and what role does the U.S. have to play in such a case?
Well, when Latvia had a presidency of European Union in 2015, one of our priorities and our goals for successful presidency was creation of European Energy Union, and we succeeded. And it does mean more interconnections, more suppliers, more diversity of supply, in particular for gas, for all the European countries, including Latvia. For many years, Latvia and other Baltic countries have been some kind of energy island in European Union, and we got our gas supply only from one supplier. It was Gazprom. Well, I wouldn't say we have had many problems with it, because we are in maybe more favorable position because we have big natural gas storage facility where we can pump during summer season gas into this facility, and then in winter season we are supplying St. Petersburg with gas. Well, we haven't had problems with Russian supply, but certainly we are interested in diversification of supply, and we are working on this possibility of diversification, and it could be through LNG. Lithuanians have already built LNG terminal, and we have some part of our gas we are getting through this terminal. There is another project, the gas pipeline between Poland and Lithuania, that another option for gas supply, and that's how it works. And that's how such energy unions that promotes energy market, more diverse supply, and that brings also the prices closer to market prices. And that's what Latvia is doing, and that's what we will do. So more suppliers, more diversity, more interconnections. That's an answer.
Well, that's a wonderful answer, and I think thank you, Ambassador, so much for a very wide-ranging discussion, talked on a lot of topics. And of course, thank you everyone for being here in World Affairs Council.
And thank you everybody for listening to me in this very beautiful summer evening.
Thank you.